Hello and welcome to the Westveil Archives. My name is Jenna. I am an author-illustrator from Newfoundland, Canada, and this is my booktube/authortube channel. It's fairly new. You may know me from my art channel, Jenna Gets Creative. It's been around for about 2 years now. And if you don't know me from there, but I'm familiar, you may know me from my Instagram or Twitter platforms. They seem to be blowing up a lot faster than the channel is. Not sure why. So I recently joined NetGalley just a little over a month ago now. If you're not familiar, it's a platform where you can apply to read different books that the publishers are putting out there as review copies. Some of them are advanced reading copies, some of them aren't. You read them, you give your reviews, you put it on Goodreads, on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, any place you can put reviews out. And as you build up your reputation, you're much more likely to get approved for the advanced reading copies. Well, I did the work. I slogged through a whole bunch of the read now titles that you don't need to be approved for, and in the process I found some YA novels that I actually really like. So I have decided that when I'm reviewing NetGalley titles, if it's an adult novel or if it's something I really liked, I'm probably going to give it its own video eventually, and if that's the case, I may hold off on posting the review on my blog until there's a video. If it's a YA or a middle grade novel, I'm probably going to do a roundup video like this, and in that case, the actual dedicated review blog post will go out beforehand. I got a little behind on that, so if you're following my blog, you may have noticed that 3 of them went out this week. I have already talked about 2 of these titles quite recently in my mid-year freakout, but I'm going to get more in depth. And then the second 2 I'm talking about are the first and second book in a trilogy, so the review I'm going to give for the second book will imply some light spoilers for the first one. So if you want to skip any of them, I will have time codes in the links down below, and hopefully YouTube will do that cool new thing where you can hover over the timeline on the video and see the different parts. First up is The Soul Thief by Majanka Verstraete, and this one was published in November of 2014. This is a YA paranormal fantasy, and it has a Goodreads average rating of 3.78. This is the first book in the Angel of Death series, but there are only 2 books, and it's been quite a few years since Verstraete has published another one in this series. She's published a lot since. She has other series. I'm not sure if she's continuing with it. This story definitely needed a sequel. I'm not saying that that was a bad thing. I actually rate this one 5 stars. But like, it clearly wasn't done. It clearly needed a sequel. I don't know if it's meant to just be a duology or if she's abandoned the series, and I won't know that until when I end up reading the second book. We'll see. Maybe the publisher will put it out on NetGalley hoping it gets more attention, but I doubt it. And I've got so much on my TBR, I will probably never get around to it, even though I did like this one. So in this one, we have a teenager, her name is Riley, and she survives a car accident. And when the accident happens, she witnesses an angel of death taking the soul of another victim of that car accident. And when she then sees the angel of death again in the hospital, she follows her, confronts her, and the angel of death takes her to the Council of the Angels of Death, where she finds out that she's actually half angel, specifically an angel of death, and it's put to a vote of the council what they're going to do with her, because there's history with halflings. There have been problems and more than half the council wants to kill her, but then the leader of the council gives her veto, and she's actually sent off to apprentice under an angel named Leander. And she's sent back to her modern world, her normal world. She's sent back to high school, and Leander installs himself as her counselor because she's just had a traumatic experience, and this is the perfect way to get her out of class so that they can work on training her up as an angel of death. But things aren't as they seem. There's trouble brewing in the angel world, and she's gonna have to solve this. I seriously couldn't put this one down. I read it in 2 days, and if I had nothing else to do, it would have been a 1-day read. Like I said, YA novel, they are shorter. It gets right into the action, and the action does not stop. It has a great cast of supporting characters. I love her friends. They're like actual, genuine friends, not the petty things we normally see with teenage girls. Mish is definitely the best one. I like the romance that buds between Riley and Leander, even though he's really, really old for her. But then, like, they're immortal beings, and it's YA, and teenagers fall in love hard and fast, fall out of love hard and fast. So it makes sense for the audience. The audience isn't going to find a problem with this. If anything, it's going to make them relate more to these characters. If this were an adult novel, I would fault Leander hard for how much of a teenage boy he's being, even though he's centuries old. But it just seems to work in a YA novel, so I don't fault it in this case. And then of course we have the angel that Riley saw at the accident. Her name is Diane, and she seriously, like, I don't even remember if she was physically described, but every time she pops up, just her complete punk attitude and lack of care for anything. She reminds me of Negasonic Teenage Warhead from the Deadpool movies, so I then pictured Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and I love her. She's definitely one of my favorite characters going, definitely adds a lot to this book. Even though she's such a minor character, she's not in a lot of it. This book does have quite the element of mystery to it, and every big reveal, particularly the bad guy reveals, none of it was a surprise to me. All of it I did predict ahead of the characters. And I think we're supposed to, because very obvious hints are dropped for some of them, but that didn't pull me out of the story. It was done in an enjoyable way, like a cozy mystery where you're supposed to get it and you're supposed to feel good about it. As far as the ending goes, the wrap-up was quick, but it wasn't too quick. I frequently criticize novels for wrapping up way too quickly. I know some readers and some booktubers, Murphy Napier comes to mind, do like books that wrap up quickly because they're just there for the plot and that's it and they're moving on. I do like to hang out with the characters if I enjoyed them, so I appreciate a book that lingers just a little bit. And this one does linger just a little bit. For those who are curious about this book, considering it for their younger children, this book does have public displays of affection, it does have some violence. Some of the violence gets, it's not too graphic, but it's there. There's no gore to speak of, there's no rape, there's none of that. It's probably safe to give to your teenager, don't give it to maybe your preteens. The second book we're going to talk about is Djinn by Kromah. Goodreads simply calls this one a YA fantasy, but I would also classify it as a YA paranormal fantasy like the previous one. This one, like the title implies, does involve Djinn. That's the Lebanese term for fae, the humanoid type mythical beings that have magic and roam the world, whether they're on the same plane as humans or not. This one was published in March of 2018, and it has a 4.13 average rating on Goodreads. So this one is clearly meant to have a sequel, and I just checked on Goodreads, it does have one. The sequel is called Concealed. I would be interested in looking for that one. So we have this girl named Bijou, and she's lived quite a sheltered life. She's been moving from town to town wherever her grandmother moves her, and when they've moved to this town, to Fairhaven, she's finally convinced Gigi to let her actually go and attend a public high school. With all of her homeschooling, she already has enough credits and high enough test scores and everything like that that she could graduate and apply on to a college, but she wants the high school experience, and who can blame her? She's 16. So she goes off to high school. She meets some friends, she meets some teachers, and there's stuff going on. She's got 2 different teachers pushing the whole Djinn thing on them, and then she sees a shadow man following her sometimes. She finds out that one of her new friends can see it too, and then they find out that girls are going missing around town. The thing is, this has already happened. 17 years ago, girls were going missing, and in both cases it's always 16-year-old girls about to turn 17 on the summer solstice. That happens to be Bijou's birthday. She will be turning 17 on the solstice, so obviously she expects that she will be one of these victims, but she's also really interested in just solving this mystery and saving these girls. I truly think that this one is classified as YA only because the protagonist is a teenager. The reading level, the complexity of the story is older. I would be tempted to call it new adult. Again, even though the main character is 16 turning 17. This one definitely needs a sequel because pretty much nothing was tied up in the end. It was basically just cut off with a whole bunch of questions left, very clearly leading into a sequel. Could have been done neater, could have tied up a few more things. The main reason I call this one 4 stars rather than 5, even though I loved it, is 2 reasons. First, it was a really slow start. I was more than a chapter into it before I got interested. Second, there are a lot of dream sequences, Bijou having a dream, and the author felt the need to actually narrate the entire dream in italic text, and this goes on for several pages in most cases. I skimmed them because, it's like when high fantasy authors include epic ballads. I'm just not interested. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention. In the beginning, Bijou is constantly shuffling a deck of cards. This is a coping mechanism she has because she's an empath, so she quite easily connects with people and feels their emotions, gets in their head, and it's dizzying to her, and she doesn't like doing it. So when she starts to feel that kind of thing happening, she'll shuffle the cards to distract herself. That is heavily featured in the beginning of the novel. She actually gets in trouble for it in class. And then partway through something happens and the cards go away and nobody draws any attention to that until she suddenly has them again, and in that case she's actually doing it as a distraction. So it felt like an oversight that such an important thing in the beginning was suddenly gone and not commented on. The third book we're going to talk about today is Esme's Wish by Elizabeth Foster. This is a middle grade / YA fantasy book. I would be tempted to call it high fantasy because it does have an entirely different world, but parts of it take place in our world, so it's kind of urban fantasy meets high fantasy. This one was published in October 2018, and the average rating on Goodreads is 4.27, which is pretty darn good. I personally rated this one 4 stars. I think this one is middle grade because of the reading level and the length of the novel. Definitely it is a bit shorter than YA, and it reads like the Narnia books. Despite that, when we meet the main character, Esme, she is 15, so that definitely falls into the realm of YA in terms of average character ages. This one does occur during the summer, so there's no school involved in this one. Esme's Wish is definitely a classic coming-of-age story. When Esme was very young, her mother went off to sea and was never seen again. She was declared lost at sea, declared dead. It's been 7-8 years, don't quite remember. I swear the years are not consistent when she's talking about it in the real world and in the other world. At the beginning, we're actually sitting with Esme at her father's wedding to her new stepmother, who she doesn't like. She objects to the wedding, she runs off, she goes to the lighthouse where her happy little family used to live and spend all their time, and she's browsing all of her mother's artwork. Seabird comes to her. This is a seabird that always visits, and it's in some of her mother's paintings. Has a nice little chat with her father. Father goes off on his honeymoon. She's left behind at the cottage with stepmom's sister checking in daily. Her name's Mavis. She hates her. She decides to go off to Splinter Bay, which is a little island, and this is where her mother and her great-grandmother had a cottage. And when she goes to the cottage, she's sitting there, she's reading papers. She finds out all these things about how before her mother disappeared, her father thought she was losing her mind because she was telling all these stories about this other place, Eolia and Esperance, and all of these people in this place. And these are the places that she was painting. Everybody thought that she was losing her mind, some sort of dementia going off into her head, and that this wasn't real. Well, the seabird comes and takes her mother's journal from the cottage. She goes off chasing the bird and ends up following it into Eolia, lands in the country of Esperance. Province? Country? Lands in the province of Esperance, meets a teenager her age, his name is Daniel, and from there she's immersed in this world that actually exists. Her mom wasn't crazy, and she meets people who knew her mother, and she discovers that, hey, something went wrong. Her mother's missing here too. Nobody knows what was going on. And something's happening with this world. There are earthquakes that started around the same time that her mother went missing. So this book is Esme and her newfound friends trying to find out what happened to her mom. The reasons that I rated it 4 stars rather than 5 are that it does have some very tired tropes in it, and there's some potentially confusing names. The story is mainly from Esme's point of view. Sometimes it's through her eyes, sometimes it's third person, but it's limited omniscient. We only know what's happening in Esme's mind. And despite that, we get some little did they know kind of moments, which is tacky. And like, if you're giving this to a middle grade audience, they're not going to notice. If you're giving this to a YA audience, they might notice because they might be lit student nerds like I was. Whenever Esme is diving into the history of this alternate world, there's a group that keeps getting mentioned. There was a great war called the Tyrian Wars, and of course that means there was a faction of people called Tyrians. This is spelled like tyranny or tyrannical, but it's one letter off being Tyrion as in Tyrion Lannister, and again, if you give this to a middle grade audience, that's probably not going to be a problem. But I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I like high fantasy. I'm thinking of Tyrion Lannister every time I come across that name. There's also 2 characters that get mentioned a lot who have very similar surnames, and they end up getting referred to by just their surnames quite often. There's Nathan Mare, M-A-R-E, as in a female horse, and then there's the infamous historical leader of the Tyrian Wars, Man, M-A-N-N. When those 2 come up on the same page, just the surnames, that's 1 letter off. That's quite confusing. But all in all, I really did enjoy this book. This is a read now title on NetGalley, so if you're there, you can grab it. It's being archived on September 15th. I actually came across the second book first, but thankfully the description did say that the first one was also available as a read now, and that they're best read in order, so I should go grab it, and I did. Finally, let's talk about Esme's Gift. This is also by Elizabeth Foster, and it's the second book in the Esme trilogy. I'm not sure if I mentioned that fact in the previous one. Yes, this is going to be a trilogy. It's not a longer series. Goodreads is currently just calling it the Esme series, but if you read the author's actual website or follow her on Twitter, you'll know she only intends for this to be a trilogy. There will only be 1 more book. As I was submitting my review, that I would be honored to read an advanced reading copy of the 3rd book when it comes out, and lo and behold, I'm now auto-approved, so if that one comes out as an advanced reading copy, I'm gonna read it. This one was published just a few months ago in November 2019. I guess not a few months, that's more than half a year now. 2020 is going fast and slow at the same time. This one has a Goodreads average rating of 4.51, which is excellent, highest one on this list. I give this one 5 stars. Again, slight spoiler warning for the previous book, for book 1, just by implication in what I'm going to give as the, summary at the beginning of the review for book 2. I'm not trying to spoil book 2, I'm not trying to spoil book 1, but a couple of things are implied. This one definitely starts off right in the middle of the action. It starts off right where the previous book ends. Esme has found her mother, and she's going back to the real world to tell her father. She gets there, she tells her father, he doesn't believe her. There's talk of sending her to a sanatorium because she's going crazy too. So she runs away back to Esperance ahead of schedule, She had been planning to be gone for a couple of weeks, but clearly she had to go now or never. The trouble now is that although her mother has been found, she's in a trance. Something to do with her gift being tampered with. She can't come back to the present. She is stuck in her viewing of the past. And so this whole novel is focused around Esme and her friends going off on little adventures, trying to find the things that will be needed for the Keeper to make the elixir that will be required so that she can return to the present. We also get to see Esme going to school with her new friends in this other world, in this magical world, and it's really cool because we just get to explore teenagers discovering their gift. Most people in this world do develop a gift, and it comes around this time in their life, you know, puberty or slightly after. So we get to meet a whole bunch of characters with different types of magic, and we get to experience their magic coming in. Sometimes it's quite comical. I really can't say much about this one because it would just be a whole bunch of spoilers, but just know that this book is very fast-paced in a good way. We meet a lot of characters, we get a lot of answers to a lot of questions, more questions pop up, we get more answers. It is a ride. I loved it. I rated this one 5 stars. I do still have a couple minor complaints. One of them is the same as previously. The names kind of get confusing. Mare and Man are too similar. At one point in particular in this one, Mare and Man are exclusively being referred to by their surname in the same discussion. And then of course the Tyrians, but I was more used to it at this point. My other complaint is that this one wrapped up really quickly. It's very clearly still left open for that third book. There's a lot of things we still have to solve, but how do I say this without spoiling it? It went from, you know, story beat after story beat after story beat, trying to achieve this one goal, and they get to the resolution that we're going to get in this book, and then the story's done. The book is done. There's no hanging out with the characters. Well, like, there's like 2 pages of hanging out with the characters. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, people like Murphy Napier would love this because it doesn't hang around after the plot is done. But I like hanging out with the characters, and there's characters we didn't get to hang out with a lot in the book that are suddenly present at the climax. I wanted to hang out with them. So I can't wait for the next book. I really hope I get to read it as an advanced reading copy. You can definitely bet I will be reviewing it on all my platforms. This one also archives in September. This one archives on September 20th. You've got 5 more days than the previous one, which makes sense. Don't worry, you can read them in 5 days. If you're also on NetGalley and you like YA fantasy, I definitely recommend the 2 Esme books by Elizabeth Foster. They are read now, you don't have to request them, you can just start. If you're also on NetGalley, let me know what you recommend that I check out next. And if you're not, well, are you interested? It's free to sign up. There are similar services out there. There's Edelweiss. I have put in 1 request there, and I have no idea how it really works, and I haven't heard back, and I'm not very hopeful. And then there's Voracious Readers Only, which is basically a mailing list. Authors, mostly self-published authors, submit their book to this service. This service emails it out to everybody. Here's the synopsis, here's the book cover, here's the author. Are you interested? You say yes, or you delete the email. And they just keep sending you more and more and more and more. And I'm pretty sure my TBR for just that service is like 30 books long at this point. What have I gotten myself into? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I upload here every Saturday and some Mondays. I do always have a companion blog post. That is linked in the description down below. And I will definitely see you again this Monday. You will be getting 2 videos next week because I have a tag video that's brand new that I am so excited to share with you guys. See you then.